So thank you all for being here. I am Stephanie McReynolds, and I work for a company called Elation. I run the marketing program there, and I also have been a Tableau user since, I think since 2010 was when I first picked up Tableau. So a huge fan of the Tableau team and the product, and very excited to be here. I have with me a customer of Tableau's and of Elation's, Sharon Graves. And Sharon has just a great background and a super interesting background at GoDaddy. She's a Tableau evangelist there. She's also the server admin, which maybe doesn't sound as sexy, but is really, really important. She also mentioned to me and keeps emphasizing that doesn't mean she just administers the server, but she has to deal with training across the company, usage, encouraging best practices, as well as the systems admin work. And so she has a wealth of knowledge to share today. She's been working at GoDaddy across Tableau and their BI systems for 6.5 years, and was there since the start of the Tableau administration. So she's gonna, Tableau implementation, excuse me. So she's gonna share some of her background today and her experience. What we're gonna, yeah, that doesn't look good, huh? All right. Let's see how that. I don't know what I pressed. Did I press something right?
Yeah, bump down here a bit. Go back a slide. Because you just had it.
And that's the end of our presentation.
There we go. Now we're back. All right. Scares me. We don't know how that happened, but we're back on track. So I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction on what we mean by governance for Insight. And then Sharon's going to talk about the experience of managing a system that's governed for Insight at GoDaddy, starting with a little bit about the data environment, then explaining how they've invested in creating unified data sources to help govern the experience of end users, and then giving you a little bit of a walkthrough of what that looks like in the GoDaddy environment. So you see what GoDaddy users are actually using on a day-to-day basis and how that works. And then I'll come back and give you a little bit of information about how this relates back to Elation and an announcement we made about Elation Tableau Edition to round out the session today. So just a few words on governance. How many folks in the room might be data stewards or data governors? All right. How many folks are analysts? All right. So pretty even between analysts and data governors and data stewards. Any just business users in the audience? You don't call yourself an analyst? IT folks or DBAs? Oh, quite a few IT and DBAs. Great. Well, we have a pretty balanced crowd, I think, amongst those three. You know, it's interesting when you look at how a lot of organizations approach governing their data and this concept of data governance. It typically refers to the people, processes, and tools that you have in place to manage your data, often for compliance. So the kind of traditional view has been, how do we make sure that we're in alignment with government and meeting the regulatory requirements of government by ensuring that we can audit how individuals are using data. So it often, from an analyst perspective, kind of looks like a roadblock when you're trying to get through some of your work. So someone in IT or someone's on a governance board has said, hey, you can't use this data in this way. And you may not, as an analyst, completely understand all of the government regulations as to why. And so what happens in a lot of organizations that are on this path to traditional governance is they first inventory all of the systems that store data in the organization. They create this technical metadata repository. Most analysts have no idea what that means or why they would need it. The information in that repository is manually documented and maintained often, so it requires a lot of overhead, of investment, and often in that process, because folks in IT or your technical documentation group are trying to get all that documentation in one place, and the analysts kind of don't understand why this is important. Sometimes the semantics of how the business refers to those columns and rows, or how that data might be applied to actually perform analysis, is kind of left behind outside of that system that's been built as a governance system for IT and auditing purposes. So the perception sometimes is that you've hit this roadblock, you have rigid data access rules, and I, as an analyst, am not that excited about working with it. What we've partnered with Tableau and GoDaddy and a number of other customers to do is really to explore the boundaries of how can governance be used for insight. In a self-service environment, how can you really begin to share best practices around the organization? There's a place for governance for compliance, but there's also a place for ensuring that analysts are actually taking those rules in stride and thinking about how they can share with their colleagues best practices about how to use the data in an organization. And so the structure of a project based on governance for insight is a little different. You're still talking about people, processes, and tools. But instead of just inventorying the technical metadata, you're starting to think about how can we really enrich that inventory with a catalog of how users are actually applying this data to the business. What can we learn about that, and how can we share what our best subject matter experts know across the entire organization? And so we're not enforcing these rules, we're actually trying to engage the analysts in more collaboration and communication about how data should be applied in our business for good purpose. So think about it a little bit more like a stoplight system rather than a dead end that you can't move around or get information from. So the idea is create interventions that then help bring along your teams to apply best practices. We often hear customers talking about this as a single point of reference. Rather than a rigid single point of truth, there's only one answer. There's a point of reference for the organization to have a conversation about data usage that includes both compliance as well as how do we get more benefit or value out of this data as we apply it across the organization. So with that brief introduction, I'd love to call Sharon up to share how GoDaddy's taken an approach to implementing that.
Hey everybody, can you hear me okay? Frankly, you can probably hear me okay without this, but we'll go down anyways. So as Stephanie mentioned, I've been with GoDaddy 6.5 years. Most of that time was in the BI organization. Started as an analyst, worked into training, implementation, like she mentioned. 2013, we implemented Tableau, so I was involved in the startup of that. Recently transitioned to what we call our data enterprise team. That team is the one that's responsible for what you'll see coming up here. They're called our unified data sets. Basically, it's our DBA team, but it's the DBA team truly focused on getting data to our end users in a structured fashion so that we can manage through it. So one of the things, when I interviewed with GoDaddy, I was really excited because one of the things they said in it was, we have tons of data. I don't know if any of you have heard that. It's like tons of data, and your eyes light up. It's like, woo, yay, tons of data to analyze, yay. Came from a healthcare organization where there was issues, problems, roadblocks, as Stephanie mentioned, of trying to get to data because it wasn't on the right system, wasn't formatted correctly, whatever. So I was very excited. Got the job, started in, and then the reality kind of hits you. It's like, yeah, they have tons of data everywhere. So we had data on multiple server platforms, MS SQL, MySQL, Teradata, whatever. Within that, we had multiple replications of that data. So you had order data on multiple servers, different formats, different structures. Various refresh schedules. You didn't know when this data was being updated. Some people did, somebody in the company did, granted. But as an analyst, you didn't always know, when is this through? Is this through yesterday? Is it through as of the hour? Because some of that can be very important when you're working with website traffic, right? And then also, varying contents. Some of it was the last 3 years of orders. Some of it was orders since the beginning of time for GoDaddy. So again, just no structure to it at all. It's limited to no documentation. We had calculated fields, AOS, CRT, various combinations of these. Not only did they use acronyms, they weren't documented as to how they were calculated. So again, from a BI perspective, we had no real truth of saying, okay, yes, this is exactly what I need to use to do my reporting, right? So analytics, data discovery wasn't what you thought. It wasn't digging into data and saying, ooh, let's see these anomalies, let's try and figure out what this trend is doing. No, it was, go find this data and figure out what it is and how we can use it and how we can move forward with it. So wasn't as much fun as you would think. And a lot of our reporting was just, Excel-based email. So we'd do a SQL query, we'd pull some data into Excel, we'd do some charting as we could, send it out in a summarized email, right? So we needed a tool. We needed something to help us out with that. And GoDaddy implemented Tableau. We implemented Tableau in 2013. We did a proof of concept with them, and then we also based our decision based on where they rank in the Gartner quadrant. Highly rated, love the product, been very pleased with it so far. So we have actually 3 sites configured. We have a base site, which is default, as all of you guys probably know it. We have a customer care site, which is restricted to just our C3 group, because we don't want them out just kind of woo-woo-woo, wandering around while they're trying to take calls. We want to kind of keep them focused on what they're doing. And then we have our IT dev site, which is where we keep all of our internal customer site traffic and kind of their internal tools reporting. We keep them separate as well. A lot of that, I have to say, was due to our initial IPO. You have your insider rules, so you had to kind of separate data out more substantially than we do now. We've loosened that a little bit because of the data that we are putting out there. We've loosened our rules to our internal staff, but we've still kept the structure for right now. We have, well, as of like a month ago, we had 842 users. There's more. 46 projects on our base site. As you know, those are pretty much configured in the pairs as kind of standard as from GoDaddy. Hosting sandbox, domain sandbox. They're configured based on our organization. 2,400 workbooks in that site with 10,000, probably 11,000 views. 140 published data sources. If we look at embedded data sources, we have 3,600. So you can see we probably have a need for some data management, data governance going on here. So it was good that Tableau kind of grew organically. We really needed it to kind of get adoption, get people out there, get people using it. Started really with the BI team. We started with them, and then we expanded out to the rest of the company. It was good to let it grow organically. And we're now kind of at a point where, okay, need to wrangle this back in. We have multiple data sources out here now of the same subject, right? So now we need to wrangle it back in, so we're working to do that. Let me just give you a breakdown of those 850 users, and I'll tell you kind of why it's so important. We have about 10 data stewards. Those are our DBAs. These are the ones that are working to build these, what we call unified data sets, which I'll talk about in a minute. They're the ones that are also responsible for data dictionary. Now, nothing that I'm talking about here is going to be rocket science for you guys. Nothing I'm going to talk about is going to be earth-shattering for you. We all have the same problem. I can question all of you and say, how many of you have ERDs and documentation on all of your data sources? And I would bet there would be very few unless you're in a very small company. So it's a common problem, right? One of the things that we've mandated, though, is as we build out these data sets, definition of done includes a data dictionary on our data sources. I understand. It's like, yeah, people have been trying to do that forever, but you really have to implement that to move it forward in a self-service world. So we've done that. Our data stewards are responsible for this data dictionary in collaboration with kind of our SME BAs and myself. So we go through and we make sure that the definitions that they're putting in there aren't DBA language. They're actually something that an end user could understand. Sentence, English, things like that, right? We have 110 Tableau desktop users. So those are the people, they have some SQL skills. They're probably using Elation Compose, which we'll show you in a minute, to do their data discovery. They can publish their own data sources. And they're publishing pretty much advanced dashboards. Again, these are not all BI, BA people. These are business users as well. Within that 110 is our BI, BA organization. Our BI is actually our data scientist in our world. Business analytics is what you would call your typical BI, I guess. Okay? So these groups, we have 20 business analytics analysts. We have about 5 data scientists. They have advanced data SQL skills. They do perform their data discovery and Elation. They can create their own data marts, so they can create their own tables in SQL and on Hive. They can publish their own data sources, and they can create their own advanced dashboards in Tableau. So that leaves the balance to be our end users, our business users using Tableau. That's a substantial portion of our community. These guys need to be guided in what they're doing because they have limited SQL knowledge. They're not going to go out there and build their own data sources. Right? They're using Tableau Desktop published data sources to typically create their workbooks. And they may modify an existing workbook to meet their needs, right? Oh.
Why is your relation data towards your DBAs and not business analysts?
DBAs have a different skill set than a business analyst or a BI analyst.
I mean, usually business data stewards are not DBAs traditionally.
Correct, correct. So in our enterprise data division or enterprise data team, it was a gathering of our DBAs. So these guys have DBA skills. They are responsible for building the data dictionary, so they're responsible for defining what is in the tables that they're building. Actually putting that into Elation and things like that is our responsibility, but we do ask them to look at Elation as well, because they're using Elation for kind of monitoring, tracking, querying, just checking on data. So we're asking them to keep their eye on the data as well in there. So yeah, I'm included in that as well. So I'm not necessarily, it's not just solely DBA, it's also the admins, and then like I said, our SMEs, we kind of, on some tables, we'll have them be a data steward as well. So this brought us to creating these unified data sets. Again, nothing earth-shattering, nothing like, oh my goodness, that's the answer. But it was important to us. It was important to us to have single tables for our end users to use that were completely defined, that would help them do their own data discovery. So these unified data sets, they're detail level data. They're all the way down to the row level, item level in an order. They're all the way down to the click level in a visit. The business rules are applied at processing so that they're not having to figure out, code 1, 2, and 3 is, web billing agent C3, right? We've worked that all out for them, so it's simplified. They're easily accessible through Tableau. They're a published data source in Tableau. They're also published as a table out in Elation for them to look at. They have to be performant. Obviously, you have end users who are not used to sitting around looking at a MS SQL screen, staring at it, going, please just finish, please just finish. Or watching a Hive query run, watching the messages go by, being happy, thinking this, yep, okay, it's running, it's running. They're not happy with that. They're not seeing anything. They don't have any feedback, so it has to be performant, has to give them the answers quickly. It has to be managed, and this is something where our data stewards come in, and actually myself, again, my role is kind of very, very typical GoDaddy. Vague. Covers a lot of areas, but we have to manage the data, so we do data quality checks. We do alerting to say, did the load miss its SLA? Is it finished? Is it failed? If it's failed or missing SLA, somebody is on it right away to make sure they're checking it to get it running and up. Okay, because these are our sanctioned, single source of reference, if you will. These are the ones we really want people to trust and care about. Definitions are standardized and documented. Again, AOS is not defined 3 different ways on 3 different tables. It's calculated the exact same way in every table, and it's defined exactly the same way in every table, building confidence for our end users. This allows them to do more accurate reporting. They aren't constantly questioning it, because one of the things when you expose data to end users, what do you get immediately? It's like, this isn't right. These numbers aren't right. These don't match what I was doing before. It's like, yeah, because you were doing it wrong before. Or we were doing it wrong before. We were presenting it wrong, So you have to go through that cycle as well to really build that confidence to say, this is right, this is the right answer for you. Trust us. Our end user, Tableau end user volume has increased, obviously, 850. I have probably 50 requests since I left town yesterday to add more people. So we're working in our AD group implementation, so don't worry, that's coming too. Our power users, our power DBAs, our Power BAs and BI analysts are now actually free to do analysis. Actually look at trending, actually look at what happened when this news alert came out. What happened to our site when an email came out from the company, or when Bob spoke, or when Bob shot an elephant. We can actually go in and look at these things and really do the analysis that they were meant to do, what they want to do. That's what they're trained to do. They're not trained to go out there and just look for data and hunt down. It's like, what does acquisition rate mean? That's not what we want them to do. So to show you quickly how these fit into our structure, we have our data collection engines. This is our Hive implementation. It's on top of our Hive Pig Spark. We have an egress out to BI, and it's surfaced in Tableau, Elation, and Google Analytics. So let me just take you through the life of a power user. Again, this is going to be a pretty simplified example, but you'll get the picture and you'll start to see some of the tools that we're using as we work through these data sources. This is Elation. How many of you guys have seen Elation? Or actually, how many have not seen Elation before? Not? Wow. Got to see Elation. Expo Hall 5? 1? 1, yeah. Got to see it. Cool, cool. So what Elation does, we have our Hive system connected to it, 2 SQL servers. We have a Redshift connected to it, Teradata. Elation goes out and profiles those systems. It's looking for table schemas, or database schemas. It's looking for table structures. It's looking for query usage. And you'll start to see this as this pans out. You'll start to see how these tables are used based on popularity. So really something, it builds up a lot of your knowledge base for you, and then you can add onto it. So it takes a lot of the pain out of building this whole structure behind it. Okay? So let's just say that I have a request and I need to go look at orders. Okay? So I came into Elation, I just searched for the word orders. Can you see my mouse up there? No, okay. So I searched for the word orders, and these table sources came up. So these are tables, these are reports. You can see down at the bottom where it says data, queries, articles, conversations, reports. It searched through all of those for a reference to orders and then gave it back to me in priority order. So frequently used, right? UDS order, I know from our email distributions, from our corporate newsletters and things like that, I know that UDS is a sanctioned data source. It's something that I want to probably take a look at. It's also top of my list. So I'm thinking, it's like, okay, let me drill into that and see if this is what I want. Again, I'm trying to find where my data is that I'm going to build my report and my analysis on. So I just came out here and just searched for orders and asked Elation to kind of help me make that decision. So it brings me into the database schema here. And there's some helpful things. We have some tags. I can see who the top users are. I can see them, you can't, because you're not allowed. The blurry. Obfuscation is great. I can see who the top users are, so if I need to, I can go reach out to somebody if I have a different question that may not be answered here. I can see in the descriptions area, I've got some links to some areas that kind of define our enterprise data team. What their roles are, what their projects are, what their roadmap is. I can see what they're doing. If I clicked on these, I would go to our Confluent system. I can see who the data stewards are. And then down here, I can see the tables that are within this schema. And I'm feeling even better now because I see UDS order is number 1. It's favorited by the little star. So if you can see that down the bottom. +5, it's been endorsed 5 times. And it's also top in priority, in popularity. Okay? So I'm going to go drill into that and take a look. Okay, good. I'm feeling better and better. The tags, it's got orders, it's got AOS, it's got units. Neat. These are things that I knew that I needed in my analysis. I knew kind of in my mind where I wanted to go with this data analysis. It also has a description of this table. It's got common use cases. It's got key metrics. So all this definition area over here in descriptions is defined out. So it can actually tell you what a good purpose for this table is. So it can help you along in your decision, right? I can see down at the bottom, seeing some columns exposed to me. You know what, I want to see all of the columns. So I can come up to the top here, this tab, columns, click it. Again, this was all gathered via Elation's querying process. I didn't have to put this in here. So it went out, it got the schema, it got the database, it got the table. It actually defined the popularity because it knows, based on the query log ingestion, how this is being used, how frequently this table is being used, right? So good, I'm seeing some good things. Shopper acquisition was interesting to me. It was one of the factors that I know that they were interested in. I can hover over the title, and it'll give me the description. This one's kind of short, but this is kind of giving you what you'll see. It's actually, this is from our data dictionary that we uploaded. Incredibly easy process. It's a CSV. You just upload it, and it populates all of this data for you. Really easy. So I'm feeling, again, even more confident. Sorry, I just smacked my microphone. Elation also has the ability to build some of these titles using their machine learning. It will go out and attempt to name the field. That's what this little, they call it a robot head, the green guy, right up on top of the description box there. So it went out and it said, okay, you have a field called order_date. I'm assuming you mean order date, to make it a little bit more user-friendly. I know for you DBA guys, you're probably thinking, who cares? For all of us on the end, when we're talking to a business user who doesn't know it, why is it underscore? Why is it ugly like that? I don't like it. We give them a nice, pretty name. Makes them feel better, makes them feel more comfortable. Okay? So the columns are good. I'm going to go over here and look at some of the commonly used filters. Again, Elation has gathered all this. I didn't have to. It's gone out, looked at our query logs on this table, and it's pulled back all this information. So I can see common filters that were applied when using this table. And one of the ones that's interesting to me is the second one here. It's actually looking at acquisition flag. I can come in here and look at used values. And here's where, this is where the data steward and where my role and some of our SMEs come in, where we can actually rate things. I can come in here and say, you know what? People are, when they're coming in to use this filter, they're using the wrong values, and it's just wasting their time. So I can come in here and tell them, by the way, you want to use camel case true, camel case false in this field. I've acknowledged it, and I've deprecated the other ones. There's also this yellow circle where you can warn. You say, okay, you can use this, but by the way, you're going to have these kind of anomalies you need to be aware of. And each one of these allows you to document. When you give a deprecation or when you give a warning, it gives you the option to document why you're saying that. Okay? This carries through for joins as well. I'm not going to go into that, but you can follow along. Lineage. I can see where this table is being used. Again, just kind of building my confidence that this is actually something that I want to use. I did not put this in here. Elation did this. Okay? And then, so now I'm at a point where it's like, okay, I really feel good about this. I'm good, ready to go. I'm going to go to Compose. Compose is Elation's query tool. So, like SQL Server Management Studio, Teradata's query tool, whatever that is. Don't know what it is. Don't know what it's called. I have to stop for a second here, though, because for anybody who has Hive, who's working with Hive, Hadoop Hive? A few. Okay. Do you like Super Putty? Do you like querying through Super Putty? No. Yeah, you're probably DBA, aren't you? You're one of those command line people. That's okay, but you have to think about it. A lot of our BAs aren't command line people. That's not their role set. That's not where they come from. So when we were told we were going to Hadoop Hive, and oh, by the way, you need to build your queries in Super Putty, command line. And by the way, there's no GUI interface, and by the way, there's no columns, and by the way, you can't export directly, and on and on and on. Really a pain point, huge pain point. This is a Hive query. This is Elation. This is their query tool. This is IntelliSense. Huge win across the organization, and not just within our BA team. Our IT guys are now saying, hey, I need access to Elation. Because yeah, you can do it in Super Putty, or PowerShell, I'm not sure, or Shell, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you guys might be familiar with, but you can do it there. This is nicer. It's nicer. If you have the table defined, it can tell you, it will prompt you the fields that you might be looking for. It will prompt you on the SQL and tell you how to build it. Okay? Sorry, I'm trying not to get on a PR pitch, but it's really important for our end users when we were using this, that this was very important to us in our ease of usability on how to go on with this. Okay? So now I've done my query. I've got a result set down here at the bottom. I can actually come over here to download, and one of the options is I can download this to Tableau. Actually, what I get is a web data connector, and it will port the data directly over to my Tableau workbook. And then through the magic of presentation, I just built this dash with that data, with the web data connector, straight over. That was nice. That's good. That's good stuff. Not maybe my presentation, but that's good stuff. Okay, so that's good, but Tableau is also in Elation. When I said that it goes out and queries our systems, it also goes out and it queries our Tableau system. And it looks at all of our reporting and all the data sources that we have out there. So you can see it's gone out and it's queried our Tableau system. We've pulled back our report names, sites, project owner, kind of the layout, and then a number of uses. It's kind of got users and views, which is nice. It's a little bit more than what we have in Tableau, but it's very similar, not rocket science, but great. I'm going to go take a look at this international scorecard. Again, it's got thumbnail views. It's good, but we have some options for documentation over here. We have some options for voting. Is this a governed or I'm forgetting, we're using a term now like global view. So this is a global sanctioned view. So we could put this as endorsed and say this is a global sanctioned. If you're looking for something that is managed by BI as something that everybody can look at, everything data solid, you can vote it. So we have the thumbnails here of the views. I can zoom in on those. This is actually that dashboard. Now here's something that's really cool. Fields. So if I want to know how the fields are calculated on that dashboard without having to download it and look at it, I can pull it up here. Easy to see, very nice option, because everybody's always asking, it's like, how is that determined? You have to download it to get into the code, right? Very nice. Again, I can see lineage. I can come in here and I could back click on these. So these are the views that are actually making that dashboard. I can back click and look into those. Okay. And then if I've decided this is something I want to take a look at further, I can click on server, and this will take me directly to my Tableau server. So very integrated, and they're integrating even more so with this Tableau edition. So really some good stuff between the two of them. I think they're good tools to work together. They're helping us manage and direct our users to using appropriate data, understanding which ones are the right ones, not like the order detail dash Susie, which was popularity 2 at the bottom of the list. But still, if somebody goes in there and looks at it and just searches on order, they're going to get it, and they're not going to be sure which one to use. So really good tool for us as far as serving up self-serve to our end users. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Stephanie.
Quick question about
Oh,
lineage.
sorry.
Do you have lineage back to the source system, or is it just to the table that the report is referencing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let me just repeat it for folks who couldn't hear it. For lineage, where does the lineage start? Is it back to the original source system where the raw data is held, or is it just referencing a table?
Like the most recent table?
The most recent table.
Yeah, it's actually, in our case, so this would be going back to UDS, because there wouldn't be anything prior to that it could see. We are putting that data into our Hive system as that structure. It doesn't go back beyond that. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
The data sets that you guys publish, is that only accessible through Tableau, or can you get it through like other type of tools?
Right, good question. It was, can we only access our data sources in Tableau, or can you access them everywhere else? So we actually published them for query use as well as Tableau. So, and in pairs, and they were identical. Yep.
And what's the format need for like Excel or anything else that you want to access? Do you publish them in your database or
It depends on the data. Right now, what we're doing, we have them sourced on Redshift. So, but we also have them on our Hive system, so they can go out and query them on Hive. If they need to, they can query them through Elation and dump it to Excel. So, yeah, but they're all out there. Anything else? And we'll have time at the end too. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, if you have something that's been a lot of work with the data dictionary, when an end user goes to the server, how do you solve the problem of having them understand what the definitions are of some of those vectors within Tableau?
Right, within Tableau, and I think that's what we're going to kind of get to on Tableau Server Edition. But again, Elation is available to all of our end user and Tableau users as well for just looking at definitions as well. So I know we're working with them. We've mentioned it, and we've talked to their Tableau people, to the Elation people, about porting some of that knowledge into Tableau itself. And I think that is kind of on the roadmap. I'm not sure exactly where, but the tie between Tableau and Elation will become stronger, and we're working with them as a partner to help push that down there. So they would have actually additional details in Tableau itself. Did that answer your question? Kind of. So I see what you're saying. So if you have UDS order in Tableau Server, how do they know all these definitions and things like that? Right, yeah. So a couple of things in our world. We have a Confluence page that has UDS order. We point everyone to Elation for the data dictionary itself. So if they have questions, we actually do point them there, say just look up the table and you'll see the definitions of all the fields that are in there. Now if you're talking about calculated fields within Tableau, don't have that yet, but we will. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the detailed questions, and thank you, Sharon, for that introduction. We'll take some questions at the end, and Sharon and I will be available after the session also if we don't fit all the questions in. I think you saw from Sharon's presentation that there are a number of best practices that she walked throughout the history of GoDaddy's implementation. They've really focused on getting the environment set up rapidly and getting users hand-on experience with the data. So create a culture around using data to make decisions and having direct access to data. And sometimes that sounds like it flies in the face a little bit of governance, but I think it's a good foundation to get the organization started in thinking through what are the challenges of using data sometimes in these environments. Another commonality we saw in Sharon's story that we see across many Tableau customers we work with is the centralization of some of those data models. So trying to wrangle people into understanding there's a set of governed data sources and there's a set of data sources that are a sandbox, and keeping those definitions clean so everyone knows where to go to for the approved data sources. And then really focusing on monitoring and auditing actual day-to-day usage so that everyone in the organizations knows what's being used and how it's being applied. And that ties into this concept of a governance for insight framework that we were talking about. Elation and Tableau have been working together, and Elation has actually had a product for Tableau customers like GoDaddy and Square and LinkedIn and Tesla and Tesco and Chegg and eBay. We've worked with many customers over the last year and a half in production implementations of Elation on Tableau. But as a couple of the folks who asked questions mentioned, we also catalog databases, Hadoop systems, other BI tools as well. So our business is cataloging data so that analysts, data consumers, can have a single point of reference, working with data stewards to enrich that understanding of the catalog, and then providing creators of data who often sit in an IT department a way to a marketplace to really raise what data is available for the organization. So for the past year and a half, we've focused on helping increase analyst productivity at those organizations through this data catalog. So enabling visibility into all the data assets, how you can be aware of what is the data pipeline, often directly to the source where we can. We do follow the data pipeline back many steps to the original source database that collected the data. And then enabling analysts to really collaborate with one another and share workbooks and queries. And as you saw Sharon present in her Tableau cataloged in Elation, raise the awareness of what's already out there for reuse in the organization across maybe multiple Tableau server instances. That's all well and good to focus on analyst productivity, but I think we've seen with customers we've been working with a second set of use cases around really governing data for insight. And that requires some additional product capabilities that we've built out over the year and a half in conjunction with Tableau as a partner. And so with Tableau, we're now able to catalog not only workbooks, but also data sources. And our intent is to catalog all of the data assets that are used in Tableau, just as we catalog all of the database tables across multiple different types of databases and Hive structures in Hadoop. We also have a methodology around encouraging stewardship. I think someone asked a question of when we were talking about how the organization at GoDaddy, what's the distinction between different individuals in that organization, and why did you select professional data stewards? Should an analyst be stewarding their data as well? And so we've been working with a number of organizations on how we can create tooling to help analysts start to share their subject matter expertise and curate data and share that with the organization, as well as having formal stewardship roles in the product and in your organization. And then I think, as you've seen through some of the screens, another distinction of information that we gather is really being able to aggregate and bubble up how data assets are being used and communicate that through Tableau so that it can be used for guidance around best practices and insights. And so we actually announced last week, we kind of revealed our formal partnership with Tableau. And announced a new product offering from Elation, specifically packaged and priced for Tableau customers. So we have a data cataloging product for the enterprise, but we also realize that there's value in cataloging just Tableau assets in the Tableau community. With that announcement of not only a go-to-market strategy and packaging with Tableau around governance for insights, we also announced to folks that we've been working in developer to developer communications with Tableau and implementing new features that will help raise information that we have in the catalog directly through the Tableau interface. So what will be coming by the end of the year is Elation's usage of Tableau APIs to be able to take a data source or a workbook that is approved by a data steward in Elation and push that automatically into a Tableau project and dynamically manage that from project to project. So if you're using Tableau projects, which Tableau recommends for data governance, say you have an approved folder and you have a default folder, Elation is able to manage movement of data assets between those folders, specifically data sources and workbooks. We also announced that you'll now be able to take tags in Elation that would indicate an endorsement of a workbook or a warning on a workbook, and that those tags in Elation would be automatically pushed into Tableau as tags that would allow you to search within your Tableau interface. So that's important to communicate the context of what's happening in the underlying systems to users of those workbooks, so that they understand if it's it's an approved workbook, but it may have some issues, what those warnings are, and have immediate communication on that. The third thing that we've announced is the ability to also send immediate emails to individuals based on anything that is going wrong in the data pipeline that we're observing from our connection to the lineage of a workbook all the way back to the source system. So if a database table is deprecated, or there's a failure in an ETL process in that data pipeline, a workbook user would automatically receive an email alert so they understand that that data that they may be using in Tableau is at risk in some way, and they could investigate it further to help with the collaboration between IT teams and the business. So there's a white paper available on our website if you're interested in learning more about those features or screenshots of the how-to, as well as a little bit of a perspective. And we also have a booth on the show floor if you're interested in diving into any specific details about your environment or would like to see a live demonstration of some of the screens that we showed here and interact with the system a little bit. So with that, we'd love to open it up to questions. I think we have about 15 minutes for questions.
I do have one other thing. I know we're on V9.6 right now. We're going to be at the end of the year. Anybody in the Tempe, Arizona area, we'll be having a Tableau day at our office towards the end of November or early December. You're all welcome to join us. Just email me and I'll get you in.
There's a question there in the second row to the back, and we have a microphone. We're going to try to capture these on the recording.
Are you able to control access at viewing the data sources in Elation?
The permissions are based on your security on the base itself. So Elation grandfathers in, like if you have permission on the table or not, grandfathers that in.
There's another question down front here.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it sounds like you'll have some sort of workflow capabilities in terms of moving workbooks, but is there any kind of general lightweight workflow for approvals? So, for example, if somebody wanted to sort of request a data source or have an intermediary team review a data source before it goes maybe to the data steward, is any of that built in?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question because a lot of folks wonder, well, how do I manage the system? If I have a self-service system where folks are interacting with their own data, how do they let us know that maybe they need a new data source? What's the ticketing process? And so how we've implemented that in Elation is through what we call conversations. So folks can open up a conversation with a team, kind of at mention whoever's the right point of contact, or if you remember back to sharing screens, there were stewards that could be listed around a data source. And so they can actually start a conversation that then is associated with that catalog page, that everyone can see that there's been a request associated with that data. That at mention then triggers an email in a ticketing system, essentially, for the appropriate contact to then respond to. So we've made it a little bit more socially engaging than a straight-through workflow process. We found that helps open up communication a little bit more with and get some of the nuances of what end users are requesting out of the system.
Thanks.
There's another question here.
Can you talk about the pricing model for the product Elation? Like, is it a subscription-based model, or how do you guys charge?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Elation is a subscription-based model. In Elation, implementation is often, if you notice, we're really targeting Tableau server customers, because those are most of the customers, as you scale to that size of an implementation and move on to server, you realize that you want a little bit more structure perhaps in your implementation. So our footprint can either run in the cloud or on-premise, and is typically a single server, and then we charge a per user subscription charge for the Elation product.
Anyone else? Well, I hope this was helpful. Like I said,
Oh, one more question.
Question. In your evaluation phase of trying to establish Tableau and figure out data governance, how did you go about evaluating some of the different vendors? I know nothing about Elation or what other similar vendors are out there. Could you speak to that?
from my perspective, so are you talking about the evaluation of Tableau or Elation?
Or from the data governance perspective.
Right. Honestly, I wasn't involved in that proof of concept. I don't know. Who are your competitors even? Probably don't want to mention them.
No, I think the one thing that's interesting is that this approach to governing your data, thinking about how do you share best practices through the organization, is actually a fairly new area. If you go back a year and a half ago, you probably didn't hear the term data cataloging in the market. So what we're doing is pretty new. There's not a lot of direct competition. There's a handful of vendors today that offer data catalogs, and we all take slightly different technical approaches to how much we automate and how much we rely on data stewards or curators to curate the data. So there's a kind of a lot of literature that's emerging about this space, but there's not a ton of large vendors yet that are offering products like this.
So I guess in general, I would just make sure that it's simple to implement. I mean, this is a complex process. If you think about it, if you're going to go out and you're going to query all your data sources, all your servers, whatever, pull in all the data, pull in all the usage, things like that, it's a complex process. So kind of think about what you hope to get out at the end. Look at the products that might be offered. Elation, I think, is covering a huge area for data governance. And I hadn't seen anything else that was near that. But just make sure you get your end goal in sight first before you start to bring in other products. And looking to see what all they can do for you. And make sure that it's simple for you, because you don't want to have to manually enter your data sources. You don't want to have to manually enter your schemas, tables, and things like that, because it's just going to be one of those things that nobody ever does anymore. You know, it's the same thing as original data documentation. Now we're in Agile. Documentation's out the window. Make sure that you have something that can kind of do things for you. In this world, it's going to be crucial.
Good question back there.
Hi. I wanted to know, we have a lot of data that's pulled out by analysts, and they run it through SAS scripts, and then it sits on a SAS grid. Can Elation read that and do data lineage?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do work with a lot of customers that have SAS in addition to Tableau or other business intelligence tools. SAS is one of the products that we have not released out-of-the-box integration to yet, but it is on our roadmap, and I know it's a frequently requested feature, so I would expect to see something from us in the future, but it's not in our currently generally available product.
I can tell you that our data scientists are using Elation for the data discovery and the data extraction, and then they're putting it into where they need it. But they are using it because of the tools behind it, because of the documentation behind it, because of the popularity voting. All of those things are helpful for them as well. And then they can just pull the data that they need out of it to put into their SaaS system.
If the scripts were in R and Python and things like that.
So the question was, if the scripts are in R and Python, can you read those, and what do you do with R and Python scripts? It's interesting that eBay would be an example of a customer that we work with, where they have a very robust data science team, and they do a lot of work in Python and R. And what they will catalog in Elation is they will catalog some of that code as a reference point. But when you look at Elation and all of the introspection that we do around queries in order to make more proactive recommendations through the application, today that's all done primarily for SQL. But we do have customers that create reference points within the catalog because they want a central repository for other scripts that they're running. And so we don't do as much introspection of those languages and codes so that we can surface joins and query snippets, but we do provide a way to catalog those with the SQL-based information that customers are using.
One thing I should mention too, Elation does have a different user interface depending on how you're logged in. So they do have the ability to, if you have just a business user, you're not necessarily going to want to expose compose to them. That doesn't make any sense for them. So they have business user roles. They have different roles that they have to apply that can give you different access. Obviously, a data steward is going to have full access. It's going to have ability to modify comments, modify descriptions, whereas a business user won't be able to do that. So there's different levels of access as well within it.
And just to clarify a little bit, specifically if you're just using Elation with Tableau, a tool like Compose would not be packaged in our Elation for Tableau Edition offering. That would be packaged in our Elation Enterprise Edition offering. So we often see people kind of starting small with Elation for Tableau and getting a lot of value from that, and then they want to expand Elation to maybe other sources of data in the organization. They're bringing on board more power users and using the Compose tool and other tooling in our platform. So there's a way to kind of start reasonably and then scale it through the organization.
Anything else?
All right, it looks like we're done with questions, so thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, everybody.